Parliament. Madam Deputy Speaker, it's been clear from the outset of the current Prime Minister's term of office that this is a Tory government which abhors scrutiny. Shortly after he took office, the Prime Minister tried to shut down Parliament completely. He did so because he was finding its scrutiny of his government's hapless progress towards Brexit tiresome. But it's Parliament's job to scrutinise, and no matter how tiresome honourable members opposite may find the subject matter of this debate, it's actually rather important. And what I would just say to the honourable gentleman who spoke before me is that I suspect his constituents, like mine, also care about how their hard-earned money is spent by his government. And they are rightly concerned because so far 2 court cases, and there are others in the pipeline, have revealed that there are major question marks over whether this government has abused its privilege to line the pockets of its mates. Now, Madam Deputy Speaker, this Parliament, when it was unlawfully prorogued, only sat again because of the intervention of the courts. And that's an indication of how important the rule of law is, and one of the many reasons why the government, the UK government, want to reduce both the scope and the availability of judicial review. Now, Madam Deputy Speaker, an unlawfully prorogued Parliament is dangerous for democracy, but so is a supine Parliament. And this Parliament is frankly a shadow of its former self. Regulations impinging on our basic civil liberties during the Covid crisis have been rushed through with the minimum of parliamentary debate. And it's not just urgent business regarding Covid that's treated in a cursory fashion in this Parliament by this government. Earlier this week, we saw a bill with major implications for civil liberties, including the civil liberties of the Gypsy Roma traveller community who are protesting outside Parliament this afternoon. We saw that bill go through without proper debate and without proper scrutiny because of the ridiculously short time that the government allocated to a debate in which there were literally hundreds of new clauses and amendments. The brutal fact, Madam Deputy Speaker, is that this government does not like evidence-based policy making. In fact, it doesn't like evidence full stop. It likes to run the country and the 4 nations of this union free from scrutiny or accountability. It likes to do so based on its Little Britain, me-first ideology and the personal ambition of ministers who haven't dared to show their face in this House this afternoon, the personal ambition of ministers who look only to their mates for assistance in return for handsome remuneration and keeping records minimal. And the way in which the government's handled the emergency Covid-19 contracts typifies this approach. And the sad thing for British parliamentary democracy is that it's only through judicial processes instigated by concerned citizens acting through the Good Law Project that the full scale of this government's chicanery has come to light. Now, so far, the Good Law Project have brought 2 successful legal challenges against the government's handling of pandemic-related procurement. But there are quite a few more in the pipeline, and I suspect there will be more than 2 successes to come. But the 2 successes so far have established that both the former Health Minister and the current, for now, Chancellor for the Duchy of Lancaster acted unlawfully. Now, that's a really serious matter, and we would be failing in our duty as an opposition if we didn't bring that matter to the floor of this House. Over and over again, we've heard representatives of the government try to argue that in the case of Good Law Project against the Cabinet Office, the court didn't find the government guilty of any actual bias. But that's a total red herring, Madam Deputy Speaker. The Good Law Project didn't seek a finding of actual bias, it sought a finding of apparent bias, which is a well-understood legal term. And the test for apparent bias in the law of England, and indeed of Scotland, is whether the circumstances would lead a fair-minded and informed observer to conclude that there was a real possibility or real danger that the decision-maker was biased. And that's the test that the court applied. And the court found that looking at the contract awarded by the Cabinet Office, a fair-minded and informed observer would conclude that there was a real possibility that the government had awarded a significant contract to a company on the basis of bias. And what that means in layman's terms, Madam Deputy Speaker, is that the court found that the Cabinet Office awarded a lucrative contract on the basis of favouritism. And even in the middle of a crisis, that is illegal. And the reason it's illegal is it's not the government's money, it's the taxpayers' money. It's my constituents' money, it's the money of the constituents of the honourable member who spoke before me, and the money of all our constituents. And these court processes have brought to light emails which would never otherwise have got into the public domain. And these emails show that the much maligned Guardian newspaper and Open Democracy were right last year when they alleged that there was institutional cronyism at the heart of the British government. I will, yes.
I'm grateful to the Honourable Learned Lady because I very much share her analysis of the work of Open Democracy and the Good Law Project. But on the subject of emails that are only coming into the public domain now, does she agree with me that the story in the Scotsman, which indicates that Fiona Hislop intervened to delay the publication of data relating to care home deaths in Scotland, was at the very least ill-advised?
Well, I'm not aware of the detail of that allegation, but what I would say is that, like the Right Honourable Gentleman, I was elected by my constituents for my sins to come to Westminster to scrutinise the actings of the British government. Just earlier this year, a whole bunch of MSPs were elected to scrutinise the actings of the Scottish Government, and that is for them to do. What I'm focusing on today is this government. And the point I want to make, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I'm coming to a close because I know other honourable members want to speak, is that the sunlight shone on the government's backdoor dealings by these two judicial reviews show why a judge-led inquiry is so important. Even when this government loses in court, it cannot tell the truth about the reasons why it lost. That's why the power to compel witnesses and the production of documents which a judge-led inquiry will have will be so important. Not telling the truth, or indeed not telling the whole truth, when you're on oath is a very serious matter, which in a judge-led inquiry would have the sort of repercussions that ought to mean most people, even this government, will think twice before not telling the truth on oath. Witnesses are far less likely to get away with prevarication and obfuscation under questioning from lawyers supervised by a judge. Saying that the cat ate the paper trail, or saying my redaction pen is my trusty shield, that approach to government won't cut it with a judge-led inquiry. And obstructing judicial orders for documents is contempt of court, and experience shows that that threat in a judge-led inquiry often brings to light records which would otherwise have found their way to the virtual shredder. So, Madam Deputy Speaker, there's something wrong with British democracy in that a government elected by only 43.6% of the UK-wide vote can rule like a dictatorship, treating this Parliament as an inconvenience. But seen from Scotland, the situation is even worse. This government has no mandate in Scotland, and the party which does, the Scottish National Party, is frequently treated with contempt in this House. And in the last few days, we've found out what most of us already suspected. The Prime Minister has so little respect for democracy in Scotland that he wants to close Scotland's Parliament down. Shame. He doesn't need to worry too much about this Parliament because he's already emasculated it. He's emasculated the Westminster Parliament. So the rule of law is our only hope, and that's what the Good Law Project's successful cases show. The only way that we can get to the truth of what this lot have been up to is by litigation and a judge-led inquiry. No wonder, Madam Deputy Speaker, they are so desperate to limit the scope and availability of judicial review, and no wonder they fear a judge-led inquiry.